I'm Sarah, 30 years old. And I want to talk about a part of my past that I've kept secret for a long time because it was very painful and hard to deal with. There are things in life that we never thought would happen to us. But they still come and change everything. I never thought I would have to suffer because of a truth that I still find hard to believe. My story isn't about love or happy families, like many people assume. It's really about compromises and feelings that are kept inside. Many people believe that love is the main reason for marriage. However, I realized that wasn't the case for my mother and stepfather from the moment I first met him. I sensed that something was wrong. And slowly I understood that my mother was just a reason he gave. I was the true reason he married her. Please subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more interesting true stories like this. Make sure to watch this video all the way to the end because the story is really interesting. After my father died when I was young, my mother, Amira, ran a small fashion store. She raised me and cared for me until I grew up. Her hard work and strong spirit helped her care for us and turn her fashion store into a favorite spot in our neighborhood. My mother has always seemed strong and independent to me. Life continued smoothly and calmly. My mother kept working hard at the store, while I concentrated on my studies. As time went on, I started university, which was a big change in my life. It was the first time I really felt free from my mother's protection and ready to face the bigger world. In my early days at university, I had many new experiences. One day, I met Mr. Ethan, who is my teacher and also my dad. Mr. Ethan was a philosophy teacher, and from the first day of class, I was drawn to how he taught. He helped me understand the subject better and changed how I see life. We talked more after class, and I noticed he had a big impact on me. But soon, I started to feel something odd about the way he looked at me. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. But as time passed, this feeling became more distinct. There were times when I talked, and he looked at me differently than a teacher looks at a student. It felt like he understood more than he was sharing. That look felt personal and quiet, full of unspoken messages. And I started to feel uneasy whenever it happened. I felt lost. It wasn't the look I was used to. It felt like someone was studying me, waiting for something from me that I didn't understand. I questioned if I was thinking too much. However, this oddness was impossible to ignore. As time passed, not only Mr. Ethan's eyes, but I also began to notice strange actions from him. Whenever I spoke or walked near him, he would move closer, sometimes touching my shoulder in a way that made me uncomfortable. At first, those actions seemed innocent, but they started to feel overwhelming and made me uncomfortable. One time, he stayed with me after class to talk about the lesson. But this chat was different from the ones before. He didn't only discuss the topic. He seemed to want to extend our meeting. The unwanted attention and closeness made me feel trapped. I no longer felt the respect and separation that should be between teachers and students. Little by little, I started to see him less than I used to. I gave reasons to skip one-on-one talks after school. When he offered to help, I said no and pretended to be busy. But really, I just wanted to keep my distance. I tried to sit farther away in class, avoid looking at him, and sometimes arrived at school late so I wouldn't have to see him before class. I thought that if I stayed away from Mr. Ethan, everything would be okay. If I didn't have to deal with those strange looks and actions, I might be able to forget the worry I feel. For the rest of the school year, I made an effort not to see him again. Things started to feel normal again when I stayed away. And I thought the problems had stopped. I didn't realize that the safety I built for myself was just temporary. After a year of school, when I got home, I saw that my mom was different. She was happier than normal. Her eyes lit up when she talked. And sometimes she would quietly laugh to herself, like she had a special secret joy. I started to think, but my mom just told me she was really happy because life was improving. One afternoon, my mother and I were sitting in the living room when she suddenly sat down next to me. She looked really happy, with a bright smile and shining eyes. She started to share something significant. She met someone important and wanted to introduce me to him. Seeing her happiness in everything she did made me feel happy too. My mother raised me by herself for many years, giving up her own happiness to take care of me. I was glad that she finally found the joy and happiness she deserved. I was really excited for the day my mother planned to introduce me to that guy. The house was tidy, and my mom had the dinner table nicely set. I saw the excitement and happiness in her eyes, and I hoped this guy would give her the comfort and joy she had been looking for. When the doorbell rang, I felt excited. Mom quickly opened the door while I waited in the living room, thinking about the man who would come into her life. When the door opened and I saw that the person who came in was Mr. Ethan, I was filled with shock. I stood frozen, not able to believe what I was seeing. All the worry I had about him came back all at once. The man my mother cared about and had introduced to me with so much love was the same man I had been trying to stay away from. A lot of confusing thoughts popped up in my mind. Why that person? When did they meet? Did he mean to do something? I felt a sudden unease in my heart, and all the memories of his odd looks and creepy actions came rushing back, making it hard for me to think straight. I looked at my mom, hoping to see that she noticed how unusual the situation was. But she didn't seem to notice at all. She kept smiling happily and introduced Ethan like everything was okay. In my heart, this was just a first appearance of a man she loved, not knowing that Ethan's presence was causing turmoil in my feelings. Mr. Ethan walked in with a calm smile, looking nice and polite. He met me and acted surprised, saying he didn't expect me to be my mother's daughter. I tried to look shocked, but inside I was really upset. My mother, not knowing what I was thinking, laughed and was excited to find out that Ethan was my teacher. They chatted happily about this surprising coincidence, while I stood there feeling insecure. I kept wondering who Mr. Ethan really was and why he played a different role in my mother's life than I had always known. Was this just an accident? Or was there something I missed? From that day forward, everything continued normally. Ethan didn't show any unusual behavior that made me feel concerned. He and Mom became closer, and their feelings felt very normal. I saw Mom happier than ever. She smiled a lot and looked bright every day. Soon after, Mom chose to remarry, and Ethan became my stepdad. Everything went well. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and our family life stayed calm and steady. As time went on and nothing unusual happened, I started to feel like I was overthinking. Maybe my earlier concerns were simply because I was stressed about the changes in both my mom's life and my own. As I see Mom happier each day, I slowly start to let go of my questions and worries. Watching my mother smile happily with Ethan made me realize that what mattered most was her finding the happiness she deserved. In the end, I accepted their partnership and truly wished them well. I wished for my mother to keep feeling happy, and I learned to accept Ethan as part of our family. Over time, I didn't notice anything odd in Ethan that I had been concerned about. Over time, I started to blame myself for overthinking and letting unnecessary fears get to me. I felt glad to see my mother so happy with Ethan. In the end, I was happy for my mom. Wished her the best and hoped her life would be full of joy and happiness. At that time, I believed everything would go on quietly. I hadn't seen anything strange from Ethan for a while, and that made me feel more at ease. I stopped worrying and doubting my stepdad because he has always been a good person who takes care of my mom and our family. I thought my earlier worries were just my sensitivity and fantasy. When I was 22, I finished university and began searching for my first job. Even though I couldn't find a good job, I chose to help my mom at her store. We spent a lot of time together, and Ethan would often come to the store to help with little jobs whenever he was free. Everything was going well, and I no longer worried about Ethan. I really thought he was a good husband to my mom and that he was also a part of my life. But then, on the worst day of my life, everything turned upside down. I was not feeling well that day. The fever made me really tired, so I couldn't go to the store with my mom like I usually do. She asked me to stay home and relax, and I didn't think much of it. That day, I was home only with my dad, Ethan, because he didn't have to go out. At first, I wasn't concerned or didn't think anything was wrong. After all those years of living together, I thought he was a good and reliable guy who really loved my mother. I lay in my room, trying to fall asleep to forget the pain and tiredness from my fever. But that peace didn't last very long. Something I never thought would happen actually happened that day. In the house I used to see as the safest place, Ethan walked into the room with a glass of water and some pills. He said the pills were drugs that would help reduce my fever faster. His voice was soft and friendly. Nothing that seemed suspicious. The heat made me dizzy, and I didn't worry about it much. I wanted to feel better and get some sleep, so I took the pills from him and drank them right away. I drank the water, not knowing that it was just the start of a terrible situation. At that time, everything felt fine, and I didn't see anything strange. After I stopped drinking, I felt normal. The medicine didn't work right away, and I was still completely aware of what was happening around me. I lay there quietly, hoping the fever would go down soon. After about 20 minutes, things started to change. Ethan came back into the room, but he didn't bring any medicine or water. His eyes showed something that worried me. But when I tried to sit up, I was surprised to discover I couldn't move my body at all. I felt completely drained, as if I couldn't move at all. I felt fear inside me as I tried to prepare myself to escape this feeling of helplessness. But I could only lie there, eyes wide open. As Ethan came closer, Ethan walked over with a calm face, but his eyes showed something that scared me. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond at all. I couldn't even move a finger. I felt scared and powerless, and my fear grew when he leaned closer to me and smiled. His smile was now frightening and cold instead of warm and friendly. He whispered softly but clearly, "I've waited a long time for this chance." I was shocked and couldn't believe what I had just heard. I was confused and struggling to understand what was happening. But everything felt like it was falling apart. The fears and concerns I had before turned into reality, and I understood that the nightmare I thought was just in my head was now real. Ethan sat next to me, looking thoughtful and smiling in a creepy way. I lay there unable to move or fight back, only able to hear what he was saying. Each line was clear and slowly showed me a scary truth I had never thought about. He started to say that ever since I started college, he has had feelings for me and has always wanted to be closer to me. He tried to get close to me, but he saw that I always stayed away and didn't let him in. He tried to reach out to me, but since I kept my distance, he decided to find another way to get into my life. Ethan started to learn about me by looking into my personal information and past. When he found out about my mother and our family, he thought the only way to get to know me was through her. He intended to build a relationship with my mother and gain her trust over time. Everything seemed to come easily for him. And soon he was my mother's husband, becoming part of my family. Hearing those answers made me feel as if I was falling into a deep pit of despair. I couldn't believe that everything happening around me was so carefully planned. I realized that my mother's happiness, which I believed was normal, was actually just a front to get closer to me. I felt a lot of pain and disgust when I learned that everything was part of his plan from the beginning to the end. After he stopped talking, Ethan came closer and looked happy to see me lying still on the bed. I felt totally powerless as he came closer. His eyes no longer showed the kindness my mother had noticed. They were selfish and unfeeling. I wanted to pull away, but I couldn't. Every move felt useless. My heart was beating fast, but my body felt stiff and wouldn't move as I wanted. Ethan leaned down, and his hands touched me, making me feel disgusted. He took over my body without any kindness. I could only lie there, unable to move, feeling every moment he was in charge. Each second felt like forever, and all I could do was wish for it to stop. But he kept going. My world fell apart as he took away everyone I knew. I wanted to resist and fight back, but it didn't help. Ethan kept going, and I felt like my body was not my own anymore. Time felt like it was moving slowly, and every second felt like a never-ending nightmare. I lay there unable to move, looking at the ceiling, trying to forget what was happening. But everything felt slow and painful. The feeling of being stuck and losing control made my fear grow stronger with every second, every minute. Everything he did and every touch made me feel less worthy and hurt my pride. I fell apart without being able to stop it. I felt like my body wasn't mine anymore. He had fully taken control of me. Everything happened very slowly, and I could only lie there in fear without being able to do anything. Each moment felt like it lasted for hours, and I just wanted it to be over. When it was over, I lay there feeling empty and numb. The room felt cold, cramped, and dull. Ethan got up and fixed his clothes like nothing was wrong, while I stayed still, unable to move past the fear I just felt. I felt like my whole world fell apart, and everything I understood and thought no longer had any significance. My mind was filled with echoing thoughts, full of pain and anger. I couldn't figure out why it happened. How could the person my mother loved, the one I tried to accept as family, hurt me like this? The pain, fear, and betrayal all combined felt overwhelming, making me feel powerless and hopeless. Ethan looked at me one last time with cold, uncaring eyes, then left the room. I was left alone with my pain, confusion, and increasing obsession. I didn't know how to deal with this situation or how to move on when everything felt like it was falling apart. After some time, as the drug's effects faded, I started to feel control coming back to my body, feeling weak and dizzy. I attempted to stand up. Every movement hurt, but I knew what I needed to do next. My hands trembled as I tried to fix my clothes, wanting to hide the signs of the awful event I had just gone through. I glanced around the room and noticed the phone on the table. It was my only way to ask for help to stop this nightmare. I walked hesitantly, my hands shaking as I picked up the phone. I called 911, and each number felt harder to press. When the receptionist spoke, I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm and speak clearly. The cops got there quickly, but it felt to me like I waited forever. When they came into the house, it became noisy with voices and rushing footsteps. And then Ethan was taken. He didn't fight back, he just hung his head quietly while the cops put handcuffs on him, as if he understood it was finished. My mother came back soon after the cops took Ethan away. She noticed that I was still shaking and weak, standing next to the cops. At first, she was confused about what was going on. When I looked into my mother's eyes, I felt all my power disappear. At that time, I couldn't keep it in anymore. Tears ran down my face as I shared everything with her. I struggled to speak as I shared the truth about Ethan, what he did, and all the pain I had been through. My mother was shocked, looking confused and hurt. She didn't say anything while I was talking, she just stood there like her world had fallen apart. When I finished, my mother fell to the ground, crying deeply in sadness and sorrow. She felt guilty for not noticing what was wrong and for introducing someone like Ethan into our lives. In her pain, she kept saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I knew that no excuse could take away the hurt we were experiencing. That day changed everything forever. My mother could never forgive herself, and I couldn't go back to how my life used to be. When the cops arrested Ethan, I felt a sense of relief. But the pain and hurt didn't go away right away. I got the justice I deserved. I dealt with what he did with courage. But that didn't mean the haunting would go away. After learning the whole truth, my mother felt very sad and sorry. She couldn't help but blame herself for bringing Ethan into our lives and not seeing who he really was. She chose to leave our shared home and temporarily shut down the shop to seek some peace. Ethan was found guilty, and I realized I would never see him again. But that didn't heal my heart. He had damaged part of my life, and no matter how much time went by, the hurt stayed with me like a scar that wouldn't go away. From these terrible events, I learned that staying silent won't help with pain or fear. Facing the truth, even if it hurts, is the only way to achieve peace of mind. Keeping quiet and hiding your feelings will only make the hurt last longer and affect you more. I understood that even though my mom didn't know what happened, her trust in Ethan and me caused unexpected results. It's very important to talk and share your feelings and thoughts with the people you care about. If I had been brave enough to say something when I noticed something was wrong with Ethan, maybe things wouldn't have ended up like this. Even though Ethan was punished and my mom admitted her mistake, things did not go back to how they were before. I had to learn to cope with the pain and memories from the past, and find peace from injuries that are hard to recover from. My mother needs to learn to forgive herself, too. Everything is still in progress, and I can't predict what will happen next. But I do know one thing for certain. I won't stay quiet anymore. I will keep going. No matter how hard things get, I will still feel sorrow and pain. But I know I have started to heal. Even though the journey is tough, I will no longer stay silent. I will find myself again and reclaim the power that I lost in that nightmare.